How much do you think your engineering degree cost you?
So as far as cost, it didn't cost me a lot other than time, right? If I would have jumped into real estate in 2008, instead of going back to school, I mean, if you're looking at opportunity cost, that's huge, right? If I would have jumped into real estate then, I would have made way more money. But that being said, I did stick it out. I have a degree and I have an engineering business now. We have 5 employees. Last year, I was able to 10x the revenue in my business. We average over $70,000 a month in gross revenue. Um, and I'm still working 1 to 2 days a week in my engineering business. And so I am making a ton of money as a structural engineer, but I am approaching it from an entirely different standpoint than 99% of the industry in the engineering world.
Welcome to another episode of The Financially Free Investor, where you will learn information and strategies on how to become financially independent by investing in real estate, something that is not taught openly in our society today. Financial freedom matters so you can live a bigger life, retire early, and do what matters most to you. Get ready to hear tried and true methods to becoming financially free with your host, Jordy Clark.
Hey everyone, welcome into another episode of The Financially Free Investor. I have an acquaintance of mine. We haven't really gotten to know each other that great yet, but I'm sure we will, especially since we're probably going to be twinning in a sense here soon.
There we go.
Jaiden, how you doing?
Doing great, Jordy. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Good. Well, yeah, man, I want to get to know you more selfishly and just hear your story more and learn from you. And, you're in the same market as me. So we just kind of pass each other in both Facebook land and kind of in all the RIA meetings. So
Absolutely.
yeah, why don't we jump in and kind of tell us what it's been like on your journey and how did you get started on your journey to financial freedom?
Yeah. Well, where to start, huh? I grew up in the construction industry in a small town in rural Utah. That's the direction I was headed in the 2008 market crash. And all of a sudden I couldn't find a job. I was making $21 an hour working construction, thought it was great. I had good prospects, and all of a sudden the market fell out and I couldn't get a job. So I decided at that time I'd go back to school. Went up to Utah State University, got a degree in structural engineering, 7-year degree. Finished that degree in 2015 and got a job working in Salt Lake City, making $41,600 a year. And so I actually took a pay cut from my electrical job. Yeah, it was insane. So 7-year master's degree, and I was getting paid less than I was as an electrician 6 years earlier, which is a little bit of a kick in the teeth,
Yeah, I'm going to circle back to that, but keep going.
Yeah, so I did the school thing. I became a structural engineer. I was excited about it initially because I found a career that wasn't going to be so hard on my body, something that I could do for a very long time. And I thought, yeah, this isn't bad. I started work and quickly realized that 60-hour work weeks as a structural engineer on salary with 2 weeks paid vacation and sitting at a desk all day is not what I was built for. It is not the lifestyle that I thought that I was signing up for when I got my degree. And very quickly, I realized that I needed to start looking for financial freedom. At that time, go ahead.
Sorry, you said something. I just want to ask a clarifying question. What were you hoping to get when you got your structural engineering degree?
Well, to be totally honest, I think that Marvel Universe had an incredible impact on the engineering world. Like Iron Man, Tony Stark, he's like, this is the new cool thing. Let's all go be engineers. And they kind of made it the cool thing to do, right? So engineering just became super competitive. There's a ton of people in the industry. And when we were going to school, they were advertising that jobs outside of school, after you get a master's degree, you should be expecting between $70,000 and $95,000 a year. But frankly, when I got out in the field and started interviewing and getting offers, I took the highest paying job that I could find. And my supervisors weren't even making 6 figures, like the highest paid in the company aren't making 6 figures. Wow. And it was a mind-blowing experience. I did learn that there's different sectors in engineering. There's like industrial engineering or private sector engineering that does get paid a little bit better. But I was a consulting engineer. That's where everybody wanted to be. We were designing buildings. I worked on some very cool buildings for University of Utah, for office buildings in the Silicon Slopes. Did some very cool projects. I worked, my claim to fame is I did some engineering on the Star Valley, Wyoming temple when I was working, which is kind of cool. I also did a very small piece of the Oakland Warriors Stadium, the Chase Arena over there.
Okay.
So I've worked on some very cool projects, and I think that the sexy engineering projects, they just don't get paid very well.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough fulfillment or satisfaction for me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that leads us into, you started your journey to financial freedom. We're probably 2016?
2015, 2016. Yep.
Okay.
During that time, it was a new presidential race. I've always been a good citizen, started reading about this guy named Donald Trump, came across some of his literature, Art of the Deal. He co-authored one with Robert Kiyosaki, and I was like, holy smokes, I got to read more of this guy's stuff. So I actually started in political investigation to find Rich Dad Poor Dad, which ultimately turned me on to real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I told my wife, we got a kid at home. It's like, I'm quitting my job. I'm never going to go to work again. And she's like, no, don't do that. Not quite yet. You have responsibilities. And I was like, all right, I can stick this out for a little while longer. So I worked for 3 more years, full time. I did switch jobs a few times I think this is actually significant. I took a lesser paying job in 2018 that would allow me more flexibility in my schedule to pursue my real estate goals. And this time I was pursuing listening to podcasts, Bigger Pockets, all the financial independence, FI mentality, reading all the audio books. But I took a lesser paying job that would give me more freedom over my schedule so that I could take Fridays off. And Fridays were my day to be a real estate investor. And so I started making calls. I started marketing to off-market leads. I started hiring coaches to tell me how to do things. And in the meantime, we transformed our home in Kaysville, Utah, to have a basement rental. So we were covering our mortgage. So I had a little bit more money to play with. And in 2018, I bought my first rental property. And it was a seller financed 6-plex in Ogden, Utah. I negotiated the terms with a 2% down payment at 4.99% interest only financing with a 10-year balloon. And so that was my first acquisition.
That's great.
Exciting.
How much did it cash flow for 2% down at 4.99?
Dude, I was crapping my pants, man. It didn't cash flow a nickel when I bought it, but rents were low. They were $425 a unit when I purchased it. And I knew that there was lots of improvements that I could make. And I'm a hustler. I grew up in construction, and I said, if it doesn't cash flow, I'm at a loss. I mean, it's just on me, right? It's just my money. And I knew that I could raise rents. And so I just went to work, started improving the units. And in 3 years, we raised the rents to over $950 a unit, which was awesome. So I probably overpaid for what the asset was as far as performance goes. But by the time we sold it, we cleared almost $300,000, which was awesome. That was over a 3-year period.
Well, what's interesting is I think a lot of people get hung up on price, and interest rate for that matter, right? But what I want people to hear is, so how much did you pay?
$525.
Okay, so you paid $525 for a 6-plex. But the silver lining is you put 2% down. That's $10,000.
I borrowed $10,000 out of my home equity line. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it wasn't even like cash in the bank. It was borrowed from your home equity line. So I think this is a great example of how people can invest in real estate with no money of their own, right?
Absolutely.
Savings.
Yep.
You find a deal, and deal is relative. It doesn't mean like a discounted house. So for $10,000, you buy a 6-plex. I'm just freaking laughing now. The gross rents were $450 a unit times 6, so $2,700 a month.
Yep, my payment was like $2,600 a month after taxes, insurance, and everything. I was not cash flowing by any stretch of the word.
Okay, so then you go in, and where'd you come up with the money to renovate?
So I borrowed some more money from my line of credit. I actually ended up partnering on this one with my dad because he was interested in partnering with me. So I borrowed $10,000 of his money, and we renovated the toilet or the bathroom and the kitchen. And then I installed carpet. And I mean, we did units for less than $10,000, just sweat equity, buying used appliances, used fixtures off KSL and Craigslist and things. And we just did them cheap, like as cheap as we could.
That's great. And then you pushed rents to 900 or 950 a unit?
$950 a unit by the time we sold it. And we turned tenants every year during the period we owned it.
Sure. So you took rents from 2,700 a month to 5,700 a month.
And I think it's important for your listeners to know that during the whole time, we did not take any cash flow.
Oh, no.
Everything we did, we dumped right back into renovations, right?
Yeah, I'm sure as soon as you started, getting those units around 800, 900 a unit, and, you were making a few $100, like that was probably going towards a new toilet or new.
Yeah,
whatever.
I mean, I stopped working there every weekend and I started hiring out the work that needed to be done. We hired a property manager, and we spent money on adding coin operated laundry in the basement and finishing some other things, but we never took a dime of cash flow.
Yeah.
The benefits that we did see from that is that we did do a not 1031, but a cost segregation study on it. Year one, we were able to offset our taxable income by $166,000 on that acquisition, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. So, but then, when you sold it, you probably had to recapture that.
We did have to recapture a bit of it, but yeah.
The cool thing I like about that is you recapture, I believe, I'm not a CPA, but you recapture as long-term capital gains.
Yes.
Not ordinary income, right? So even though you have to recapture the depreciation if you don't 1031 exchange, I think it's still more beneficial to do cost segregation studies on bigger stuff like this.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
especially with the new tax codes that were implemented in the 2016 administration. I mean, we supercharged our depreciation schedule and took as much as we can. So yeah, there was some recapture, but ultimately,
and I think a lot of people again get hung up on, oh well, I may not want to do that because what if one day, and I think you guys did a great job because you capitalized on what you had to get further ahead, right? And so often I hear people and they're like, oh, I'm going to buy this single family house and I'm going to keep it for 30 years and pay it off. And I'm like, okay, like, that's not a great strategy. Like, that's not a bad strategy, but like what happens if you, like you guys did, you get an opportunity to exit and you get this wheelbarrow full of cash, like I think about how long would it have taken you as a structural engineer making $41,000 a year to save up $300,000?
Dude, I never would have done it.
No,
frankly.
And that's the cool thing about the power of real estate that I like, and I love hearing this story. So please keep going. What did you do next?
So at that point,
yeah.
I mean, 2018, bought a rental. It wasn't cash flowing. I still couldn't quit my job. My wife says, this is cool, but keep going. I was still like, let's quit. But I did learn a lot of things in the acquisition of buying a sixplex. I learned how to market. I learned how to make cold calls. I learned how to talk to sellers. I learned how to write offers. At the time I was I was analyzing 10 deals a day, and my goal was to send 2 offers a day during that whole period. And so I got really good at sending offers, analyzing property really quickly. And ultimately what I ended up doing was in 2019, I partnered up with my partner, Joey Webb, and we hired somebody to cold call for us. We were both working full time, and we said, we don't have time to do this. And we chose to pull leads and teach somebody else how to cold call. And the first week of him on the job, he got a hold of a seller in North Salt Lake that had a 1031 opportunity that he was buying. He was buying property in Boston. He had a property in Salt Lake that he could sell. And if he could get it done in 10 days, it would save him like 180 grand on taxes. And he's like, if you can do it, do it. But you got 10 days to close it. I need $10,000 non-refundable earnest money down, and you can't walk the property. So take it or leave it. And I was like, 18 units right on Highway 89 in North Salt Lake at $2 million. That's a steal. And so without even walking the property, I went and talked to him. I wrote him a check from my home equity line again for $10,000 non-refundable. At the time, my wife didn't know that it was non-refundable, which you got to love those, right? But I put it under contract. I made 3 phone calls with the anticipation of I can't come up with $2 million in the next 10 days. I need to either wholesale this thing or find a partner or anything. The third person that I talked to said, yeah, I'll buy it from you for 2.1. And I mean, that was life-changing money for me at the time. We wholesaled that in 10 days. 10 days later, cashed a check in the bank at $100,000. And that was November of 2019. And I said, I'm quitting my job in January. So January 1st, 2020, I became a full-time real estate investor.
That's great.
So,
And man, like you think about it, that one deal, 100 grand, did you wholesale that on your own, or were you splitting that with somebody else?
Joey and I split it. So it's 50-50.
Still, I mean, that's your salary in a year
Easy. Yeah.
that you have all up front, and like that gives you some runway. So
yeah, I mean, ultimately I put 8 months of expenses in the bank at that point. And I said to my wife, like, I have to try this thing full time. I'm quitting my job. Worst case, I'll go get a job in 8 months. And
dude, I love that mentality, because so often, like, I wonder if he's going to be listening. I'm not going to call him out directly, but I offered a job to somebody to come and work for me. They were going to make what they were already making, but doing, real estate investing and helping our team and just everything we've got going on. I need more help. And he's like, well, like, I don't know, this other job I have is the most secure job in the planet.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, okay, you're not wrong, but I'm offering to pay you what you're already making. And like, worst case scenario, you can go back and get this job, because like, it's an in-demand job. You can go. So I love that, because you bet on yourself, right?
Yeah.
And the thing I want people to take away from that is, you walked away from a 7-year degree. Well, you didn't walk away from it, right?
But I mean, sunk cost bias is a real thing. And I had a hard time making that decision. I mean, yeah, it was tough.
Yeah. Well, you invested so much to get that job. And then I think, unfortunately, what happens in our society a lot of the times is people are afraid to walk away from that to do something they really enjoy. And then they're miserable for 40 years.
100%.
Because they're like, well, I can't go and do something else because insert whatever they're telling themselves, right? Yeah. So
no, I'm super passionate about this topic that we're talking about, Jordy. I'm writing a book actually called Mediocrity. We are perpetually groomed to sacrifice our ambition. And it's so critical for people to understand that society in general has so much pressure on us to limit our ambition, to like sacrifice our goals and dreams at the expense of security and safety. And I mean, it goes back generations. I mean, since the Great Depression, really, when the majority of people were self-employed, working the family business, to the people that said, hey, let's go to school and get a job because there's where security is. And I think that we just need to break through those boundaries, break free of mediocrity, and embrace our full potential. And people don't realize that.
I love it, man. How did you and your wife emotionally work through that? Because this is a big deal.
It's a huge deal. I mean, I am super fortunate that when I left my job, I 10x I paid more taxes in year one than I did my salary as an engineer. And I think people don't realize their ability to contribute at a higher level. They just have never been able to taste that, right? And so emotionally, it was extremely difficult for not so much my wife, because I'd proved that this can work, right? And we had a plan, but it was hard for my wife's family. After I quit my job, my wife's grandmother called me and said, "What are you doing to my granddaughter and my great grandkids? You're leaving this secure job you're going to be on the streets in a couple of years." And it was emotionally challenging that way, to have somebody call me and tell me that they were concerned that I'd be on the streets in a couple of years. But it's just a great example. I mean, everybody knows the story of crabs in a bucket. You can't surround yourself with people that are going to shatter your dreams or hold you down or not let you be free, right?
Yeah, well, and the hard thing is, like, I'm sure she was just coming at it from a place of love and wanting
100%, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. And I don't judge her in any way. She's just doing her very best to watch out for her family.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, so you jump in, you're doing it full time now. What was that like?
Yeah. So I mean, 2020 January 2020, I quit my job, started to go in full time. March 2020 hits, and I'm like, oh my God, or oh my goodness, this is insane. These guys, like, COVID struck. I thought I was going to be on the streets for sure, talking to everybody. Like, we had 2 deals under contract, and we ended up backing out of both of them during the last week of March, when everything went crazy because earnest money was going hard. Nobody was buying anything. If I would have been able to wait 2-3 more weeks, I mean, real estate was back after that. But yeah, it was a little bit of a scary time. We purchased our first fix and flip property. We had a few other deals that we were working on, but very quickly I began to recognize and realize that, yeah, I can make money in real estate, but those paychecks may only come every 8 to 12 months. They're heavy hitters. Like, our average deal size during the first 3 years in business was over 70 grand. We were only doing 2-3 deals a year, And so I quickly realized that I needed to have that monthly cash flow, pay the bills, put food on the table, do all these things. And I have this license, the state license as a structural engineer, and I'm surrounded by flippers and contractors and developers that need a structural engineer. And so I just started writing a little report here, writing a little report there, stamping things, and making decent money. But I said, this is just my side hustle. I'm only going to do this 1-2 days a week. And so I started scheduling my Tuesdays and Thursdays with engineering appointments, and started doing real estate the rest of the time, which worked out really well. It kind of forced me to identify tasks that I would focus on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then allocate that time in real estate, like, be very strategic with my time. I had to track what I was doing, and I had to offload the tasks that I needed to during the rest of the week. And so that was an extremely crucial time for me as far as becoming a leader and a business owner.
That's great. Keep going.
Yeah. So I started that little engineering side hustle. Like I said, in the first year of real estate business, I paid more taxes than I did my salary the year before. Incredible feeling. We did extremely well. We wholesaled 7 or 8 properties with average wholesale fees of over $70,000 a piece. We flipped a couple properties, and we landed our first development deal. That was an interesting one. Seller finances 2 half-acre lots side by side that each had a home on them. One was in total disrepair. The other one had a tenant in it that was paying $600 a month. And I actually got this lead from doing engineering on this project in the previous year. And the seller approached me and said, hey, I'm trying to sell these properties for $600,000. But the one was, it needed a $100,000 renovation, and the other one was not producing enough income to justify the price he was asking. And he tried to list it. We tried to find a buyer, and he ended up coming to me and said, what can I do? And I said, what if I could buy it from you for $600,000, but you carry the majority of the note for 12 months in second position? And he said, well, tell me about that. And I was like, well, I could bring a hard money lender in for the down payment to get the loans out from underneath you so that you can be out of the project. And then if you could wait 12 months, I can get you the rest of the purchase price after I renovate and develop these lots. And so we put it under contract. He subordinated to my hard money lender. My hard money lender brought $385,000 to closing. The seller required $200,000 of loans to be paid off, and then he carried $400,000 in second position for 12 months at 6% interest. So I walked away at closing with $185,000 in my pocket. That was pretty cool.
I was going to say, the math is adding up to you getting a check at closing.
That's right, on the acquisition side. So that was pretty fun. We ended up dumping all of that right back into the property. We subdivided those 2 lots so that we had 4 lots, 2 vacant lots in the back. They're flag lots. We flipped the one house, and then we didn't really do much to the other house that had the tenant in it. We just kicked the tenant out, cleaned it up, and listed it on the market. And we did really well in that year. Seller was thrilled with what he got. He got 6% interest on his $400,000. He got his purchase price, and he got out of it. And we had a lot of fun. Huge learning experience. The thing that I learned most on that project is that I love the development side, and I'm really good at it with my background as an engineer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And again, this is another example of how you made multiple 6 figures.
Yep.
With none of your own money.
None of my own money. Yeah.
So, like, if people are out there again listening, and I'm going to harp on this just for 2 more seconds, if you're out there saying, well, now's a bad time to invest because, I read an article on CNBC and I don't have any money, and, insert whatever you're telling yourself of why you can't do something. This is another example. Like, this is post COVID. So, you could have had all the COVID excuses,
Yeah.
but you didn't. And, you solved the seller's problem, which is really all he wanted with a sale anyways. You just had to do it a little bit differently. Your hard money lender was on board because they're in first position, so they're most secure.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, dude, this is like a win, 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 win all the way around. The hard money lender's making, his world go around. The seller doesn't have to deal with this anymore. You get to go in, be more creative, do what you enjoy, and make a boatload of cash.
Absolutely. Yep. So fun.
That's great.
Yeah. So we continued to flip properties. 1 to 2 a year is all that we've averaged since then. I have learned in the last year that I am not a good house flipper. I come from a construction background, did a lot of new construction growing up, and I'm also a structural engineer. And I have this insatiable need to fix it up to like a standard that is very high, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I think that my skill set is more geared towards the development side, the new construction side, everything that way. But I have a very strong tendency to over improve things and I under budget and do things. And we had double whammies last year with the last project we did with incredibly high construction prices, went through the roof. I mean, we spent over $200,000 on our framing package on our last renovation, which was insane. It was $1 million rehab on a 6,000 square foot home. So, I mean, huge rehab. Like, just to be able to finish it was a huge, I feel like it's a huge credit to my ability to perform on something like that. $1 million rehab is not something that for the light of heart.
Yeah.
We are selling that one next week. Unfortunately, we're going to lose about $300,000 on that one, but it's a lesson learned. And I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned how to manage contractors better. And I think the way we're moving is we're moving a lot more into the multifamily, the syndication space, and then the development space as well.
Cool. Yeah. So quick question. How much do you think your engineering degree cost you?
Cost me? That's a great question. I had scholarship because of a few different things for my undergraduate degree. And then I was offered a grant for my master's degree. So as far as cost, it didn't cost me a lot other than time, right? If I would have jumped into real estate in 2008, instead of going back to school, I mean, if you're looking at opportunity cost, that's huge, right? If I would have jumped into real estate then, I would have made way more money. But that being said, I did stick it out. I have a degree and I have an engineering business now. We have 5 employees. Last year, I was able to 10x the revenue in my business. We average over $70,000 a month in gross revenue. And I'm still working 1 to 2 days a week in my engineering business. And so I am making a ton of money as a structural engineer, but I am approaching it from an entirely different standpoint than 99% of the industry in the engineering world.
Yeah, man.
So, I mean, I am fortunate that my degree is still paying for itself. I will say that when I quit my job, I said, I'm never looking back. Engineering is the worst. These guys are awful. And I was pretty bitter towards the school system, but as I've grown older and wiser, I mean, I'm very grateful that I have the blessing of a master's degree and a structural engineering license.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, dude. I think you just got a master's degree in real estate with your guys' North Salt Lake deal.
Yeah, that was an expensive degree, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, but if you look at it like education versus you lost money.
Oh, 100%.
I think that's how you have to look at it if you want to be investing for the long term. Because, I mean, dude, how many people do you know that jumped into real estate over the last 5 years, especially like the last 2 years?
Yeah.
And, all of a sudden they lose some money and they're like, oh, I'm never doing this again.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I look at it as that, number one, I bought an education. Number two, I believe that I bought credibility, because no successful investor can say that they've never lost money on a deal. This is the first time I've ever lost money doing real estate. And yeah, it's a big one, but it's bigger lessons learned. And I can tell you that none of my investors lost any money. We paid everybody out the full interest rates that we borrowed from, which is awesome. And I'm extremely fortunate that this didn't sink my ship. You know, I can keep going. We still have deals. I mean,
thank you for joining me for another episode of the Financially Free Investor. If you found value in this episode or know someone who would find value in this information, please share with them, subscribe, and send us a review.